The studio lights blazed, casting a harsh glow on the polished stage of cross-examination, Vanessa Cross's infamous talk show. The air crackled with anticipation as the audience shifted restlessly in their seats, eyes fixed on the empty chair at center stage. Tonight's guest was no ordinary celebrity. It was Robert Downey Jr., the man who had charmed his way through countless interviews with his legendary wit and charisma. As the theme music swelled, Robert strode onto the stage, his casual blazer and easy smile a stark contrast to the razor-sharp atmosphere. He waved to the crowd, his eyes twinkling with a mix of confidence and curiosity. Settling into the chair, he turned to face his host, the formidable Vanessa Cross, known for her cutting questions and take-no-prisoners approach. Vanessa sat across from him, her posture rigid and her gaze intense. In her hands, she clutched a deck of cards, her arsenal of questions designed to strip away the carefully constructed facade of her guests. The air between them practically sizzled with tension, a silent battle of wills about to unfold. As the applause died down, Vanessa leaned forward, her lips curving into a predatory smile. "Welcome, Robert," she purred, her voice deceptively soft. "Are you ready to play a little game of truth?" The audience held its collective breath, sensing that this was no ordinary interview. It was a duel, and only one could emerge victorious. Vanessa wasted no time in launching her first attack. "You have fame, fortune, you could live like a king, but you choose a simpler path. Does that really make a difference in the world?" Her tone was challenging, almost mocking, as if daring Robert to defend his choices. Robert's smile never faltered, but his eyes sharpened with interest. He leaned back in his chair, considering the question for a moment before responding. "Vanessa, have you ever thought about how many people feel invisible every day?" The weight of his words hung in the air, causing a ripple of murmurs through the audience. Vanessa's expression flickered, caught off guard by the unexpected depth of his response. But she quickly recovered, shuffling her cards and preparing her next move. She was determined to crack through Robert's polished exterior and expose the vulnerabilities beneath. The audience watched, transfixed, as the verbal sparring continued. It was clear that this interview was rapidly becoming a battle of wits and wills, with neither participant willing to back down. The stage had become a gladiatorial arena, and the spectators were eager to see who would draw first blood. Undeterred by Robert's initial parry, Vanessa pressed on, her voice taking on a harder edge. "You've lost friends, battled addiction, faced arrests. Hasn't that destroyed you?" The brutality of the question sent shockwaves through the studio, eliciting gasps from the audience. For a moment, Robert's confident facade wavered. He lowered his head, fingers intertwining in his lap, as the camera zoomed in on his face. A distant look clouded his eyes, hinting at memories of darker times and irreparable losses. The studio held its breath, wondering if Vanessa had finally found her mark. But when Robert raised his head, his voice rang out clear and strong. "Pain never destroyed me. It taught me. It taught me that nothing is permanent and that every moment matters." The raw honesty in his words struck a chord, and several audience members discreetly wiped away tears. Vanessa hesitated, thrown off balance by the unexpected depth of Robert's response. She had come prepared for witty banter and deflection, not this unflinching confrontation with hard truths. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face, as she realized this interview might not go as planned. Regaining her composure, Vanessa decided to switch tactics. Her next question was carefully calculated, aimed at Robert's insecurities about aging in an industry obsessed with youth. "Robert, you're over 50 now. Hollywood doesn't care about actors your age. Don't you fear becoming irrelevant?" The audience stirred uncomfortably, some muttering at the blatant indelicacy of the question. They watched Robert intently, wondering how he would respond to this direct attack on his career longevity. The tension in the studio was palpable as they awaited his reaction. To everyone's surprise, Robert's response came with a gentle smile. "Vanessa, have you ever watched a sunset? It's beautiful, but have you ever heard anyone call it irrelevant because night is coming?" The simplicity and profundity of his answer left the audience stunned for a moment before they erupted into applause. Vanessa's grip on her cards tightened as she realized she was losing control of the interview. The game she had so carefully planned was backfiring, with Robert turning each pointed question into an opportunity for wisdom and reflection. She knew she needed to regain the upper hand, and fast. Desperate to regain control, Vanessa decided to push even further. "Have you ever thought about what will happen when your time comes?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implications of mortality and legacy. The studio fell into a hushed silence, all eyes fixed on Robert. Robert tilted his head slightly, his expression thoughtful. After a moment of contemplation, he responded with a question of his own. "Do you know the difference between fear and faith?" The unexpected turn left Vanessa momentarily speechless, her carefully prepared cards suddenly seeming inadequate. The audience leaned forward in their seats, captivated by the exchange. What had started as a confrontational interview was evolving into something far more profound, a discussion about life, purpose, and impact that transcended the usual celebrity gossip. Vanessa struggled to find her footing, realizing that her aggressive tactics were no match for Robert's wisdom and composure. She had come prepared to expose his weaknesses, but instead, he was revealing depths she hadn't anticipated. The balance of power was shifting, and she knew it. In a last-ditch effort to regain control, Vanessa played her final card. Her voice dropped to a near whisper, laden with a mixture of challenge and genuine curiosity. "And if no one remembers you when you're gone?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of existential dread. The studio held its collective breath, waiting for Robert's response. He met Vanessa's gaze steadily, a soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "The question isn't what they'll remember about me. The question is what they'll remember about you." His words resonated through the silent studio, striking at the heart of human existence. Vanessa froze, her carefully constructed persona crumbling in the face of this simple yet profound statement. For the first time in her career, she found herself without a retort, confronted with the truth of her own legacy and impact on the world. The audience sat in stunned silence, absorbing the magnitude of the moment. What had begun as a sensationalist interview had transformed into a profound reflection on life, purpose, and the mark we leave on the world. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted dramatically, charged with emotion and introspection. As the weight of Robert's words settled over the studio, Vanessa found herself at a crossroads. Her carefully crafted image as the ruthless interviewer seemed hollow in the face of such wisdom. She looked down at the cards in her hands, suddenly aware of how meaningless they had become. Robert leaned forward, his eyes kind but intense. "Vanessa, why do you do what you do?" The question was gentle, but it cut to the core of her being. The audience watched, transfixed, as the tables turned and the interviewer became the subject of inquiry. For a moment, Vanessa struggled to find words. Her usual sharp retorts and cutting remarks seemed inadequate. She looked up at Robert, then out at the audience, suddenly aware of the impact her words and actions had on others. The studio lights seemed to dim, focusing the attention on this unexpected moment of vulnerability. Vanessa Cross, the woman known for breaking down celebrities, was herself being broken open, forced to confront the motivations behind her career and life choices. Vanessa took a deep breath, her usual poise faltering. I wanted to show the truth, to strip away the facades and show people as they really are." Her voice was barely above a whisper, but in the silent studio it carried to every corner. Robert nodded, his expression compassionate. "And in doing so, what have you learned about yourself?" The question hung in the air, inviting not just Vanessa, but everyone in the studio to reflect on their own lives and motivations. The audience watched, spellbound, as Vanessa's carefully constructed walls began to crumble. Tears glistened in her eyes, a sight no one had ever expected to see from the infamously stoic interviewer. I don't know anymore," she admitted, her voice breaking. In that moment, the dynamic of the show shifted entirely. What had begun as an attempt to expose Robert's vulnerabilities had instead revealed Vanessa's own hidden depths. The audience found themselves witnesses to a profound moment of human connection and transformation. Robert leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Vanessa, the truth isn't something to be weaponized. It's something to be shared, to help us grow and connect." His words seemed to fill the studio, resonating with a wisdom born of experience and reflection. Vanessa looked up, meeting Robert's gaze. For the first time, there was no challenge in her eyes, only a questioning vulnerability. How do you do it? How do you face the world with such grace? The question was earnest, stripped of all pretense. The audience held their breath, aware that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The battle lines that had been drawn at the beginning of the show had blurred, replaced by a shared search for understanding and authenticity. Robert smiled, a warm, genuine expression that seemed to light up the studio. "It's not about facing the world, Vanessa. It's about facing yourself, and then inviting the world to join you in that journey." The simplicity and power of his words left everyone in the studio momentarily speechless. As Robert's words sank in, a visible change came over Vanessa. Her rigid posture softened, and the sharp glint in her eyes was replaced by a look of thoughtful introspection. She set aside her cards, no longer needing the crutch of prepared questions. "I've spent my career trying to expose others," Vanessa began, her voice hesitant but growing stronger. "But I never stopped to examine my own motivations, my own truth." The admission hung in the air, a testament to the unexpected turn the interview had taken. The audience watched in rapt attention as Vanessa continued to open up. Gone was the aggressive interviewer, replaced by a woman grappling with her own identity and purpose. Robert listened attentively, offering nods of encouragement as she spoke. What had started as a confrontation was evolving into a dialogue, a shared exploration of what it means to live authentically in the public eye. The energy in the studio had transformed from tense anticipation to a collective sense of witnessing something profound and deeply human. Vanessa took a deep breath, visibly steeling herself for what she was about to say. "I've always been afraid," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid of being seen as weak, afraid of not being good enough. So I attacked others before they could attack me." Robert leaned forward, his expression compassionate. "Vulnerability isn't weakness, Vanessa. It's the most authentic form of strength." His words seemed to resonate not just with Vanessa, but with everyone in the studio. Many in the audience nodded in silent agreement. As Vanessa continued to open up, tears began to flow freely down her cheeks. But for the first time in her career, she made no attempt to hide them. Instead, she faced the cameras, allowing the world to see her raw, unguarded self. The studio was silent, save for the occasional sniffle from the audience. What had begun as entertainment had become a powerful lesson in human connection and the courage it takes to be truly seen. Robert and Vanessa were no longer adversaries, but fellow travelers on a journey of self-discovery. As Vanessa wiped away her tears, a new light seemed to shine in her eyes. "I've spent so long trying to tear people down," she said, her voice stronger now. "But maybe it's time I learned how to build people up instead." Robert smiled, a genuine expression of warmth and encouragement. "That's the beauty of life, Vanessa. We can always choose to change our story. It's never too late to rewrite our narrative." His words seemed to lift a weight from Vanessa's shoulders. The audience watched in amazement as Vanessa visibly transformed before their eyes. The sharp-tongued interviewer was gone, replaced by a woman ready to embark on a new chapter of her life. There was a collective sense of witnessing a rebirth. As the energy in the studio shifted, it became clear that this wasn't just about Vanessa's transformation. Robert's wisdom and compassion had touched everyone present, inviting them to reflect on their own lives and the impact they wanted to make in the world. As the interview drew to a close, Robert turned to address not just Vanessa, but the entire audience. "Life isn't about the roles we play or the masks we wear," he began, his voice resonating with conviction. "It's about the connections we make and the love we share." Vanessa nodded, her eyes shining with newfound understanding. "I think I'm ready to start asking different questions," she said, a small smile playing on her lips, "not just of my guests, but of myself." The studio erupted in supportive applause, acknowledging her courage. Robert stood, extending his hand to Vanessa. As she took it, rising to stand beside him, there was a palpable sense of a new beginning. "Remember," Robert said, addressing everyone, "our legacy isn't in what people remember about us, but in how we've touched their lives." Undo. The studio lights began to dim, but the energy in the room remained electric. As Robert and Vanessa stood side by side, no longer adversaries but allies, it was clear that everyone present had been part of something truly transformative. The game of truth had become a journey of discovery. As the cameras prepared to cut away, Robert turned to Vanessa one last time. "So, what's the next chapter in your story going to be?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with encouragement. Vanessa's answer was lost as the theme music swelled, but her smile spoke volumes. The audience rose to their feet, applauding not just for the celebrities on stage, but for the profound truths that had been shared. Many were wiping away tears, others were hugging their neighbors, all were deeply moved by what they had witnessed. As people began to file out of the studio, the buzz of conversation was filled with reflection and inspiration. "I'm going to call my mom," one person was overheard saying. "I want to tell her I love her." Another spoke of quitting a job they hated to pursue their passion. The studio emptied, but the impact of the night's events lingered. In living rooms across the country, viewers sat in thoughtful silence, contemplating their own lives and the legacies they wanted to leave. The game of truth had become a catalyst for change, touching hearts and minds far beyond the confines of a talk show studio.